nonethewiser.
Okay, welcome to hashtag nonethewiser. This week we are joined, I am joined with our guest Jon from the States and our regular co-hosts Lucas and Jonas. We do have Ruhm in the background. He can't speak. He is voiceless this week, but he is listening. I hope he's listening, or he might be taking a nap. But he is recording, so appreciate that. To all of those who are still on the fence as to whether you should, subscribe or not, please do. You'd be helping us out. And look us up on Instagram. And obviously, we've got all the merchandise, t-shirts included, and hoodies. So if you're interested, just contact us. It's we don't want to make a profit. We just want to make you happy. So that's one way to lighten the world at the moment. So. Yeah, this week we're going to be talking a bit about finances, the importance of, what has finance to do with our everyday lives, of our future. We're all under 30 still, and at least until November. The future is still very much unwritten for most of us, and finances plays a big role. Last time we spoke about cryptocurrency. And obviously moved into the question, well, what can I buy with my, Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatever it may be. And so this week we've got Jon, all the way from, where are you based at right now?
So I'm in the DC area, Washington, DC.
All right.
Yeah.
And what are you doing there right now, Jon?
So I am currently a staff accountant at a very large construction and window cleaning firm called Valcourt Building Services. So we do a lot of construction, and we started out as a window cleaning company. So the people rappelling from the huge skyscrapers, cleaning windows, we do that all up and down the East Coast. I think we're the biggest company on the East Coast. So and if you have cracks in foundations and skyscrapers, very expensive projects, we dabble in all of that. So that's what I'm doing right now. Before I was doing this, I worked briefly as a government consultant with a consulting firm based out of DC. Didn't do that for very long before a recruiter poached me into my current role. But yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. And you're originally from where in the States?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Southern Arizona, a tiny town just north of Mexico. I'm kind of on the Arizona-New Mexico border, about 2 hours north, 2.5 hours north of Mexico, if I remember right.
Oh wow! So
tiny town.
Yeah, tiny town. We've spoken, before. Maybe I'll tell the brief story about how we met. Jon came to Germany. When was this? About 3 years ago now.
Yeah, 2018, I believe.
Yeah. Wow, time goes so fast. And you were interning at the church headquarters, European headquarters here in Frankfurt for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And which department were you in?
So I was technically in the welfare department under Gilles Francois, who was my boss, and I was running the supply chain for the welfare department. So we were we were very focused on the refugee crisis. It was kind of phasing out of Europe, but there was still a lot of mainly sub-Saharan Africans coming into Europe. So I would contact people on the ground in the various countries they were going to, and make sure they had supplies there, and that we were, the supply chain was running smoothly there.
Oh, awesome. And during it was 3 months, right? 3 months you were here? Yeah. And obviously you lived very close to where Lucas and I live, or where he used to live. So we used to hang out quite a lot, and ever since then we've just kind of kept in touch. And so because you studied at, was it BYU, Idaho, right?
Yeah, Brigham Young University, Idaho.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. What did you study? Just for the listeners.
I studied financial economics and statistics, and did a lot of music stuff. I started off as a music major, vocal performance. Also played trumpet quite a bit in college in the jazz band, audition jazz band, concert band. I was in their audition choirs, so kind of dabbled around a lot. I was double majoring in data science for a little while, and then decided I just need to graduate, at a certain point. So financial economics and statistics was what ended up being So, yeah.
Snap. Well, thanks for coming on. I mean, I've been talking about having you on for a long time. And every time we chat, it ends up being an hour or two. How would you describe our conversations? Usually, I think quite in depth.
A bromance.
A bromance.
Yes.
That's a good word. Yeah, that's a good word.
It really depends on the topic also.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, before we move on to our topic today, we've got Lucas here, obviously, with his wonderful, couple of questions that he's going to see what answers you're going to give to him. So, Lucas, take it away.
I'm gonna ask you 4 questions. You know, you're important, so I'll give you 4 rather than 3.
Oh, wow.
You ready?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. The last thing you ate is now the only thing you can eat. How long till you die?
That's a pretty good question. So I had some Greek yogurt with some homemade chocolate mixed in, and some nuts and some homemade granola, all mixed around, and the nuts were almonds and walnuts. So I feel like it was a diverse enough meal that I could be okay for a while. Got some good micronutrients in there, some good protein. So, before suicide, because I'm a foodie, and I love diversity in my diet. I'd rather not answer that section of the question, but I think empirically speaking, just on like the nutrition, I think I'd be okay for a little while. But, yeah,
that makes us happy. That makes us happy. You wouldn't die too soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Question 2. If you could have any animal as a pet, which would it be and why?
So maybe it's because I just recently saw again the hilarious picture of Vladimir Putin riding a bear. I think if you could domesticate a bear, the uses are incredible.
Okay, what kind of bear? Because there's quite a few. Would you go for a panda bear?
I would say grizzly myself.
Grizzly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do
you think your wife would approve?
I think if the bear was on my side, I don't know if it would matter that much, but no. No, I think she'd come around. She's pretty open-minded, so.
It's funny that you mentioned bear, though. When growing up, I always wished I could go to school on a polar bear. How majestic would that be?
That's a pretty good thing. When I was growing up in school, the only thing I wanted to do was be a pedestrian. I didn't even know what that meant, but that was. When people ask, like, what do you want to do, John, with your life? And I want to be a pedestrian when I grow up.
Sounds very professional. Sounds very professional.
I don't know what I thought it sounded like a pediatrician, or I don't know, but
a policeman.
Maybe, and but grown-ups always encouraged me, so I actually didn't know what it meant for a long time. So polar bears, pedestrian, everyone has their different things.
I wanted to be somebody who walks on foot.
Well, I hope you're acing it. I assume you're acing it, because if you're not, then
living the dream.
Living the dream every day of your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Question 3. You're a mad scientist. What science experiment would you run if money and ethics weren't an issue?
If money and ethics weren't an issue, I think the psychology of psychedelics is really interesting. I ethically would never run that experiment. I think for just moral, personal reasons, I wouldn't want to subject people to those kinds of things. But I am very curious about a lot of unexplored avenues of psychedelics. But
okay, how big would your experiment be? Would you just take the whole of the states, just feed everyone psychedelics?
Put it in the water.
I mean, in statistics, I know I wouldn't do that. I know, but that's the moral John talking, who wouldn't do the experiment at all, right? So, I mean,
So just what's necessary, if
Just
there
what's
were no rules.
necessary to have a good study, for sure.
But it sounds like all those experiments have already been done. I mean, like putting a small town under drugs is nothing new. It
I mean,
happened
that's
before.
true. Yeah.
And also, in especially in the UK, they're researching a lot about psychedelics and mental health
Yeah.
and how they correlate, which is also a big thing that's now starting to opening up. So I guess it's the dose, right? It's the dose.
Yeah. But I'm
I
a
think
mad scientist, right? So I don't mind
Oh, yeah, so, yeah.
redoing other people's work. I think I'm better. So, yeah.
I would just take the money and run. It's right there. It's easy. See what happens. Question 4. Who out of the 3 of us, so not including you, has the worst haircut?
I'm out.
I mean,
Well, it
Marcus is
depends.
probably the go-to. Worst haircut? I mean, I come from a family of really balding individuals. So, like, when I see hair, I'm just jealous, right? Like, I'm just, happy for you guys. It looks like Jonas didn't style his hair a
No,
ton.
I didn't.
So, I mean, I don't think it's a haircut, but just the fact that we're on a podcast. So I'll go with Jonas because I feel like it's pretty safe.
It's fine
You
because
did
I'm also very balding. Like I just don't show it.
Oh, there we go.
You did that so calmly, though. Usually that, a question where you have to pick one of us, would stifle someone or make them feel awkward, but you're just like, you know what? Yeah, it's you. Boom. It sucks.
It sucks to
Okay,
be Lucas right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, so as my questions, you've passed.
Perfect. I didn't know I was going to potentially fail, but that was...
Well, if you fail, we'll just kick you out.
If none of us laugh, then I
Yeah.
Shortest podcast, yeah.
Be a very short podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. And if people don't want to listen anymore because they don't think it's going to be any fun later, you suck.
It's valid.
No, but obviously Lucas is there to lighten the mood and break some ice. So John, obviously, me and you, we've been talking about finances. We talked about economic markets, stocks, everything. We talked about universal basic income last time as well. Politics, you name it. So, obviously, the topic today is finances, but I wanted to start off with a use case, and obviously, this is not just to you, but maybe also to Lucas. Lucas has studied also economics, and is doing international economics right now. But if I'm a student, I am a student. I've got maybe, let's say, $50 every month that I want to invest somewhere. What options do I have? Is that wise even to invest such little money?
So it's kind of a loaded question, I think, because there are a few assumptions that I would want to make sure were checked off before we even hit the investing equation. When you get impatient to invest, you set yourself up to fail, in my very humble opinion. Not so humble opinion. You'll find, if you study economics, especially financial economics, and you get very strong opinions about these things. So I think the first assumption that we have to have is that you are out of consumer debt, period. Right. If you're in credit card debt, if you have an account with PayPal that's credit, even if it's not a physical card, and you have a balance on there, paying 18% interest to 27% interest is stupid. You cannot make that kind of return consistently in the way you would like. So, that assumption needs to be made, especially in the States when most people have consumer debt. You need to get out of consumer debt. $50 a month, boom, towards consumer debt. Next assumption I would have is that you have a very healthy emergency savings and emergency situation set up for you. The history of the world, there have been ups and there have been downs. It's very easy when things are going smoothly. We're getting out of COVID. Oh my gosh, we're out of the recession. I don't need to save money. False. You always need to have an emergency fund. And the very practical reason, apart from just being able to eat and buy clothes or move yourself in an emergency scenario to another city, is people get so forgetful that you could lose your job, you have a health issue, and then all of a sudden you're raiding your investment account at an inopportune time, and so you're cashing out maybe when the investment is lower because you have to pay for your wife's car accident or her medical bill or your own surgery that you weren't expecting. So with those assumptions, if you are out of consumer debt, if you have a very healthy buffer, the next assumption that I barely consider investing because I think it's common sense is just to invest if in the general market, whether that's through a Standard & Poor's S&P 500 index or an ETF. We can get into like what that means later. Sure. But I would say if you're not allocating at least $5,000 to $7,000 US dollars or 5,000 euro ish a year into like something that tracks the general market, just so you have the security. You're not worried about beating the market. You're not worried about underperforming the market. You're just going with the market. Then I would open an account with a broker. We can go into that as well and just start putting money towards that, because that will be your long-term retirement. You have to take care of yourself. You have to, if you care about yourself, if you like yourself at all, hopefully you imagine your future self as a real person who will be destitute if you don't have a good retirement plan. And so you invest in the general market. And then if that assumption is met, you're investing in the general market, I would say, Bitcoin is a fantastic option. Yeah.
Interesting.
So very long answer, but yeah.
Bitcoin. Okay. Wow.
I was actually looking at Jonas to see if his facial expression would change.
Yeah.
I haven't given a whole
a
podcast on Bitcoin.
I mean, it's very interesting because since the last time we spoke about Bitcoin, like obviously the market crashed a lot. So that's exactly what I prophesied in the last podcast. Point. Like you can earn like crazy amount of money, but you could also lose it overnight. So
I think that's what makes Bitcoin and any investment a fantastic investment. There's two styles of investing, and one is, I mean, you could subdivide it into how many divisions you want, but a lot of people think of it as value investing or like speculative investing. So value investing, I'm actually thinking of the intrinsic value of a company. How much is Apple producing in value, not just like money, what's the stock price, like none of that. You're just thinking, are they offering a sustainably valuable service or product that's going to be around in 5 years, 10 years? And is the market reflexive accurately of that value? So it's a very long-term Warren Buffett style approach. Or speculation, where you're just like, Bitcoin has no value. Like it's not tracking a government like a bond. Like it's not tracking a company or a CEO. It's just there. Like the only thing to look at is the price, which is pure speculation. And so in a speculative type investment, you actually want ups and downs, because the way to make money in anything is to buy low, sell high, period. If you do that, then you're great. And if you can see, oh my gosh, Elon Musk just crashed Bitcoin, as Warren Buffett says, get greedy when everyone else is fearful, and get fearful when everyone else is greedy. And so around me personally, around the time when I start seeing ads on YouTube and coming into my spam and my email for like, here's a course on cryptocurrency, I'm looking to sell, because people are getting greedy, people are getting comfortable. And then I'm going to enter again when it's on the news, like, oh my gosh, look at how much money people have lost in Bitcoin, in cryptos. That's when I'm like, okay, it's a good time to get in because it's low. So I think buy low, sell high. Just, and don't get so worried about making a buck in the very near future. Like if it takes 2 years for Bitcoin to go back up and you make 100% return, which is actually pretty low for Bitcoin, that's still a fantastic investment. So,
and I think that's one topic that I want to talk about as well. Is because I bought some ETFs, and maybe either you or Lucas can briefly explain to people what are ETFs, because that acronym is thrown about quite a lot. maybe Lucas, you want to start with that?
Well, actually, I'd like to kind of backtrack a little
Sure.
bit with something that Jon said concerning, if you love yourself, then, you'll invest because you want to be able to spend some money in the future, especially. And I think we also have to consider the big difference between just in this conversation, the European side and then the American side and the social structure, where
Definitely.
at least in Germany, most people pay into a government pension. You can opt out of that and pay into a private one if you wish. But in the States, I think you're a little bit more flexible with how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when you go to invest, you really have to consider why you're doing it, right? You have to think of, is it a short term? Do I just want to make a quick buck? Is it a one year or less than 1 year? Is it 3 to 5, or is it literally, as you said, a really, really long time? And I think that helps to then gauge how much risk you're also willing to take, right?
Definitely.
Because as you said, if you want to end up with a decent amount of money later on in life, then going with lower risk over time is a good thing. But if you really want to make that quick buck, then bet on a racehorse. Just bet on one share, whatever. And I think that leads into another thing that people really have to understand is, I guess I'm a little bit more conservative when it comes to investing, right? So I will speak about ETFs, but I also have more diversified ETFs, right? I like diversification. And so there's this gambler's fallacy, right? In the essence of, let's take a coin, it's heads, heads, heads. And then the gambler will say, well, then it definitely has to be tails the next one. Well, that's not how it works. That's not how odds
Still
play.
50-50.
Still 50-50.
Yeah. And I think there are a few fundamentals one has to understand to be able to start to feel a little bit more comfortable getting into things,
Right.
whether it be transaction costs. I had a conversation with a friend. He was really interested in getting involved in investing. He's a student, so obviously he doesn't have a great deal amount of money, but it's something that he can put in, every month or whatever. And there are options in Germany at least. But his structure, his strategy, he had completely forgotten about transaction costs when you buy and when you sell. And just putting the maths in front of him, I was like, your shares that you want to buy would have to increase by like 20% to cover just your transaction costs.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. How you get in and how you get out, I think is really, really
definitely. It can get complicated. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. The whole moral of investing, right? Because I just looked up statistics. In Germany, it's 10%. 10% who are in debt right now. In America, it's 80% in the debt cycle, right? So everyone who's in debt right now better turn off the video.
Pay your bills.
Investing is not an option, right? And then also why invest?
If I could just put a plug in really fast too, and I would say specifically consumer debt. Like if you have
house or whatever,
a mortgage, even student loans that have a lower interest rate, maybe a car, just depending on if it's a high interest rate. And I would define a high interest rate as above 4 or 5% compounded annually. But yeah, I just want to plug that in there because some people do come away with the idea oh my gosh, I have to pay off my mortgage, I want to get out of all of my debt, and then I'll think about retirement, and they lose out on years of compound interest working for them. So
exactly, yeah. And the other point was why invest in the first place, right? And this is, we're probably going to talk later about where to invest and stuff, but I think this is also a big part of it. If you because especially in the crypto market, right, there was this rule of thumb when you asked all the CEOs and stuff, they all said you look into the tech and what this actually represents, and then you decide if you want to invest, right? Because I remember the whole ICO hype a couple of years ago, all the people started investing in any coin that just came up because it just has huge returns, right? But they all crashed after a month, right? And that's because there was no real tech behind it. It's the same with stocks, right? you want to invest in a company, maybe a smaller one, you want to check like if it's a good company, if it's having return of investment, stuff like this. And there's also where the debate with blockchain and Bitcoin and Ethereum is, where's the future? And this is also like, we talked about the tech, about blockchain for so long in the last episode, because that's important.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, Bitcoin is the wrong cryptocurrency to invest in, right? But that's just from my perspective, obviously. But that's what I just wanted to get rid of, right? So if you invest, it's all about why you invest. If you invest in a retirement fund, yeah, you're going to invest in steel and stuff like this, right? Like solid companies which have like, which go through 50 years, right? Mm-hmm. If you want a short-term investment, it's kind of like gambling almost, if you're not sure what you actually invest in.
I mean, yeah, I would agree. If you have no idea, like if you're just shooting at the wall, you know, and hoping it hits the bullseye, then that's a very American expression, I guess.
The more money you throw at it, some of it's going to stick, you know.
Something's going to stick, right? Is the idea, but I think you don't have to just adopt one investment strategy. You know, I would say do it all. You know, make sure first things first, your retirement is squared away, because whether you make a buck short term or not, you're going to get old, ideally, right? You're going to survive. You're going to be in your 60s. And, you know, especially in the American retirement system, you cannot live off of Social Security. It's not enough money, especially if you want any kind of lifestyle. And, you know, there's debate as to whether that will even be around, because politicians have actually borrowed the literal money set aside for Social Security, you know, to fund other programs. And so, you know, wherever you are, you want to make sure that your long term is squared away. And, you know, like Lucas was saying, with the diverse perspective is probably recommended. So something that follows the general market. You know, an ETF is a great way to do that. You can buy it yourself. ETF is an exchange traded fund. That's what the acronym stands for. So all that means is that you can buy and sell a collection of stocks as if it was one stock, or a collection of commodities. You know, like you can buy into an industry, you can buy into a company, a few companies, as you know, very, very easily. And in the sense of a long term, you know, preparing for retirement perspective, if you want to go diverse, which is a very recommended strategy, there've been Nobel prizes won on the idea of, you know, diversity pays off over time.
Can you just explain? Yeah. Sorry, could you just explain maybe why? What does diverse mean, and why would that be such a positive thing?
Yeah. So let's say you are invested specifically in a company that manufactures and exports lumber. You know, it's a one product thing, and your business thrives based on the regulation around lumber harvesting, and it thrives around the price of lumber. And so with just very few inputs, and maybe the price of oil, you know, to transport the lumber, very few inputs into this thing. And so let's say that you are invested in this, and it, you know, regulation changes, price goes down, you know, technology changes, and all of a sudden, you know, it's not doing so hot. And it could be for a few weeks, could be for a few years. And if you're wanting to retire soon and that happens, and all of a sudden your portfolio is cut in half, you know, you're not going to want to retire. And that's a very real thing. You know, we could be talking about an extra 5 years that you need to work because you're not in a different side of things. So let's say that, you know, lumber definitely profits, like lumber companies profit when lumber is high, but construction firms, you know, upwards of 20 to 30% of the price of a home in the United States is made up of lumber. The price of lumber costs a huge input. And so construction companies do a lot better with their margins when lumber is lower in price. And so if you own a little bit of a lumber company, which is a stock. It's ownership of a company, and you own a little bit of stock in a construction company, then you can do fine in either one. It's kind of balancing each other out. And you can do that with commodities such as, steel, oil, wheat, barley. You can do that with companies that have kind of inverse relationships with each other. And so the idea with the diversified portfolio, and you can get really math heavy with this, but you want to lower the amount of risk overall. Generally, historically speaking, the market, the United States market specifically, has gone up around 9 to 11% a year. And that includes the Great Depression of the late 1920s. That includes World War II. That includes the recessions of the 80s. That includes Vietnam. That includes the Gulf War, the Korean War, the War of Iraq, Afghanistan, includes COVID. So historically speaking, we bounce back and it does well. So if you're following the general market, if you have a little bit of your money spread everywhere, then you'll do really well. The main problem with diversification that a lot of people face is that, it takes a lot of money to buy one stock sometimes. Like a stock of Amazon is well over $1,000. And if you want to buy another company to balance it out, then, it takes a lot of money to have an equal balance. So an ETF, an exchange traded fund, where you have a professional doing it for you, and you just put money, you pay into a huge, account basically, and they take your money and they diversify it for you. There's a lot of value to that, I think, because you can get diversity immediately.
Yeah. And firstly, thanks for that. And you and Lucas spoke about, firstly transaction fees, costs, getting in and getting out. And we also talked about risk in the sense like, when do I get out? Buy low, sell high. And I remember my dad, he said, I think Lucas was maybe 12. I remember being at Almaz and Orpaz. We were sitting in the lounge and my dad switches off the TV, grabs a notepad, a pen, and says, "I'm going to teach you some basics about money." and I was like, I want to watch TV. what do you do? Of
course.
And but he said, make sure that you have access to your money at all times, and that means if you're nowadays it's much easier because we've got online banking, mobile banking. It's just never been easier to be able to manage your money. But at the same time, he says, look, we grew up in the UK, visiting Germany. Well, how do I access my money from Germany that is in a bank account in the UK? How do I access that? Well, also, what fees do I pay when I try and access this? And I think people forget that when they go traveling, that, not only do I have to have another currency, but if I pay with my card, what surcharges do I pay? What premiums do I have to pay? And a lot of people could have just contacted the bank and said, I'm traveling, and they give you a reduced rate sometimes about, withdrawing cash and so on. But we forget that. But also, how much money does it cost to get in? And how much money does it cost to get out? Am I aware of how much money or how much percent my investment would have to increase by so that I'm actually able just breaking even? Right. And I think one of the principles my dad also told us was, it's all good. You talked about, first pay off your debt. What it doesn't benefit me if I earn 3% on my investment, but I'm paying 27% on my debt. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't make any sense. But also, we call it, was it fluidity? Is it fluidity?
Liquidity.
Liquidity. Right. Something with fluid. It's no good me. Let's say I earn $1,000 as a student a month, and my rent is $500, so that's already half of it gone. We're members of the church, so we pay 10%, so that's another $100 gone. So it just reduces very, very quickly. So maybe by the end of the month, the amount of money I have for food and for amenities and just for going out. Well, we can't go to the cinema right now, but when cinemas are open, there's no point in me investing money if I'm going to go hungry at the end of the month, because and that goes back to having an emergency savings. Because what happens if my washing machine breaks, or like you said, in the States, maybe you don't have health insurance, or the health insurance doesn't cover something. you're going to have to pay for that, and you're going to have to then reach into your savings, whether they be in your bank account or stocks or ETFs.
Just want to piggyback off of that. I think out of the podcast, the best thing that I could give anyone is just attain as much knowledge as you can on any topic that you're interested to pursue. First of all, I think that's a life thing, but I think with finances especially, because it's not an emotional based science. It's not an emotional based that's how I'm going to win, just by, oh, my heart is telling me go left, so pick this or pick that, but rather, as you said, Marcus, know how liquid everything is. Like, read the fine print. And I think that's, like, nowadays very difficult for a lot of people. They think, oh, I got to do this quickly. I just want to, as Jon said, kind of, he doesn't like, is like, if you're impatient and you just make rash decisions, I think that can get you into a lot of trouble, right? Yeah, so spending the time to understand some fundamentals. One really great website that simplifies a lot of things is Investopedia. And I think
I was going to say that one.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you're going to mention that as well. It means that I'm not completely wrong, because it has great little videos to explain things quite simply, and you can reread things on a really broad sense, right? Now, just jumping back to diversification, we've been talking mainly about, like, the stock exchange, the stock market, investing in that way. But there are other ways that you can invest, right? And Jon mentioned one, which is your house, mortgages. That is a physical asset, that you own. And obviously, it's a long term, and you have to be in a position to be even able to do that. And
definitely,
and I think for me at the moment, I'm a student, so it's not really possible. So yeah.
Jon, to move on from that, because obviously, putting $100 into an ETF, into an ETF every month, as a student is doable. For me, that I thought, okay, I'm going to do this as a midterm. Anything between 2.5 to 3 years to 5 years. I want to keep it in there, just see how much, just a relatively steady increase, nothing too risky. I wanted to talk about risk aversion, but I think that's going to be, I really love this topic because it's just so juicy, but I want to move on to something else, which is what Lucas said, the long-term things. We are all going to be, Jonas has already finished studying. He's making the big bucks, right? Okay, Jonas, can I tell the iPad thing that you said? Is that okay?
No. Hold on. So let me first, before we go into that, because I think before we lose all our viewers, we don't earn any money, right? Because Jon said that for capital investment, you should invest at least yearly like $5,000, which is like $500 or $400-$500 a month, which is a lot of cash.
It is a lot of money, yeah.
And I wanted just to point out that we're talking about capital investment, right? So we're not talking about investing in yourself. So if you're an entrepreneur, for example, you invest, okay, I'm going to make my own t-shirt business brand or whatever, right? This is a totally different form of investment, right? But just for long-term capital investment, why is it such a high number? Why not just start with $50 a month?
So yeah, that's a great question. So something that people don't understand, and it goes back to what Lucas was saying about educating yourself. It comes down to not understanding how much money you need to retire on. If you get to 60 years old, and I'm just gonna be super blunt, and if you get to 60 years old and you have $1 million to your name, and you plan on living for more than 10, 15 years, you are broke poor. I really mean that. If you only have $1 million to retire on, and you want any kind of lifestyle, and you want to not just scrape by, and because just think about this. If you want to retire on $1 million, most people think of $1 million as just $1 million, and then you divide it by 20 more years, right? And then you just take a chunk of that $1 million each year for as long as you live. If you're
do we talk about like liquid $1 million or do we talk about capital? Like
I think John means like if you literally had a liquid 1 million and no other income in the future. Correct, John?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. If you have a liquid $1 million and no other income, right, and you want to live on the next 30 years off of that money, it's going to run out very soon, because for one, $1 million is not going to be worth nearly as much when you're 65 as it is, right now when you're however old you are. Inflation is eating your money away. It's eating at your value. And so all of a sudden being a millionaire is not as big of a deal as it was definitely 50 years ago, when people were really like a millionaire was like a billionaire way back when, 200 years ago, when you had millionaires walking around. So you have to understand that your money is constantly losing value. And so you want to be increasing your money. And if you're a wise steward of your money, instead of just there's a really good allegory, and it's of the goose that lays golden eggs. I don't know if you guys were told this story, but the idea is that there's a goose and it has this ability to lay an egg of pure 100% gold, and but it only does it once a day, one egg a day. And these broke farmers go into from poverty, abject poverty, to extremely wealthy because they're able to sell this pure gold every single day. And but one day the farmer gets greedy and he kills the goose with a knife, cutting open the stomach, trying to get more eggs out, because he's just convinced that there's just more eggs there. He wants more than one because he can't wait for that one a day. And he kills the goose, and all of a sudden the thing that is making him money is dead. It is no longer. And so ideally, the concept that I want to drive home is that you want a passive income for yourself when you're older. If you just have a set amount of money, $500,000, $1 million when you're retiring, and then you immediately start eating at that, we call it principal in finance, at that money, that lump sum, then you're slowly chipping away at that goose. Ideally, you want that money invested, and then you're scraping off the returns that it's producing for you every year. So if you have $1 million and you have it invested in bonds or in stocks, and you're making 5% a year, instead of thinking, oh, I'm a millionaire, you're living off of 5-10% of $1 million every year, which is significantly lower, right? So instead of thinking like I have $1 million to spend, you only have $50,000 a year to spend that $1 million is making. It's significantly lower. And so I guess to your point, Jonas, like why is $50 not enough? Is it even worth it? It depends. If it gives you the habit to start investing more seriously, it's totally worth it. If you already have, if you're out of debt, if you have an emergency savings, you got to start somewhere, start doing it for sure. Compound interest is very powerful. But if you're really serious about wanting to live off of passive income and not just raid and kill the goose, and you want to live off of passive income, you want a very, very healthy nest egg is the financial term for that lump sum of assets that you're going to be living off of. I hope that makes sense. But
yeah, it does. Yeah,
definitely. So that means I guess most of our students most of our listeners are students our age. What should they do with the spare money then?
So
I mean, you basically say there's no point investing long term. So can I go gamble it?
So I think gambling is always a bad idea, and I would define gambling as something that is, if you were to repeat it over and over, you are probably, in a statistical sense, going to lose again and again.
But I mean, you said that I'm going to lose it anyway through inflation, so I might as well gamble it away, right?
Spend it on donuts.
So if you have €50, I would say invest it for sure, and I would recommend an ETF that follows the general market. The S&P 500 is a great example of that. Vanguard is a company that has an ETF that follows the S&P 500 very well. I mean, every dollar that you can makes a difference, but not settling. I guess what I'm trying to drive home is not being content with $50, not thinking that you're settling, that you're okay with just $50 a month. Do what you can, but try to budget. And obviously, if you don't know how to budget, and try to see if you could reallocate some of your spending into investing, then learn how to budget. YouTube is a great resource for that. There's some great courses, but I would just say try to shoot for $500 a month if you can, at least in the long-term perspective, and more if you're over the age of 30.
Okay,
if you can.
One last question for our students. Is it better to take this $50, like you said, put it in an ETF, or take my girlfriend out for dinner?
So hopefully they're not mutually exclusive, right? Yeah.
I guess because that's a question like Marcus put in his preparation. Like, should I just enjoy life more than if I have these $50, or should I think, oh man, when I'm retired in like 40, 50 years, man, I better have this $1 million. Like,
so I think it's a good point. Something that I am a huge fan of is not killing yourself right now so you can live like a king when you're old, right? Life doesn't just begin when you retire. Life physically starts falling apart when you retire, right? Like your knees get blown out in your tennis match, and things get much less enjoyable. I think in a lot of ways, maybe in an emotional way, that they're very satisfying if you did a good job, but you'd be foolish to start living life to the fullest and enjoying it and going out to dinner if you're at 60. So there's a balance for sure, but I think the word balance or things like moderation get hijacked by I think real moderation and real balance looks very disciplined to the non-practitioner. If that makes sense, but definitely, I mean, take your girlfriend out, man. Like, but it's not mutually exclusive. If you have one, if you don't have one, get one, because it's a fantastic,
hobby.
But I think a wise steward of their life will balance these things and be responsible. Part of being responsible is taking care of yourself now and future self. Both, they're equally as valuable.
Right. Can you put this in percentage? So how much of my money should I save? How much percent? Let's say it's the end of the month, I paid my bills. How much of the leftovers should I save, and how much can I spend for enjoyment and living life? Okay,
so I am very averse to percentages myself, because so let me there's an interesting study that shows it was done I think in 2017 2018, so the numbers might be higher, but they were saying your enjoyment in life is no longer increasing after you make more than $80,000 a year. And so you enjoy life more and more. Like, people say money can't make you happy. It's like, well, this study actually shows that it's very linear in the upward direction up until about $80,000 a year. So it might be more like 90 in today's money. And then it kind of flatlines. Like, it's very marginal. And it actually tapers off a little bit as you get into really high net worth individuals. And so I personally think that if you are Jeff Bezos, or let's take a step back. If you are a 40-year-old with $2 million in assets, and you're making a healthy income, and you're only investing 10% of your money, that's pretty silly. There's a concept in economics called your marginal propensity to save, which is simply if for every dollar you get, how much of that as a percentage are you saving? And there are a lot of studies that show that, and the inverse of that is your marginal propensity to consume. So for every dollar that you get, how much of that dollar are you spending? in America, it's actually like, I think 1.1. You're spending $1.1 for every dollar you get, which is, consumer income 101 or consumer debt. So I don't like percentages because your marginal propensity to save will naturally increase the higher net worth you have. So as you realize that like money doesn't make me more happy, I have pretty much a lot of the stuff that I want, that I need. I'm eating the foods that I enjoy. I'm not going crazy. But then you can afford to invest more. So, but if you like if you're a broke college student, your marginal propensity to save might be 1%, versus 20 years from now it might be 57%. So I don't like hard rules because life changes. Yeah.
That's a good explanation.
I think what really stands in the way is the concept. It's called hyperbolic discounting, right? It means like, it sounds really fancy, but it's how much you value the present over the future, right? You think, oh, it's in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, something in between that time, I'll figure it out, right? It's so, am I willing to spend today, to consume today, to enjoy today, right? Your question, to take out your girlfriend or wannabe girlfriend or your substitute for a girlfriend. But if I do that, I give up the future benefit, right? And from an economic standpoint, that discount factor, that preference is very different between individuals. And that's also, I think, what makes it very difficult to be able to just give one answer that fits for everyone, because we also experience life differently, right? Maybe it's easier for Jon to forgo things today because he gets more of a kick out of knowing that in the future he'll get more money out of it. But for Marcus, it's just like
party.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Pretty much.
So for some people, they enjoy human relationships more, and they want to invest in that. And I think that's maybe something we haven't spoken of as well.
Yeah, and there's real value to that for sure. And just knowing who you are. And there's a very famous American budget guy who talks about investing. His name's Dave Ramsey. I really don't like Dave Ramsey, even though I say a lot of the same things that he does, because he is so religious on numbers. Like, you have to have this much saved up, and then you do this, and then you have this much saved. It's like what you were saying. Money is different to different people. And so it would be inappropriate, and maybe it was inappropriate for me to save $500 a month. But I think a few fundamental questions that you need to answer for yourself and get educated about: how much money do I need to retire on to have the lifestyle that I want, and to be comfortable, and to be able to pay for old age, and to be able to pay to see your kids and grandkids and pursue hobbies? How much is that in a real dollar amount? And then you look at it, and then you work backwards, and you say, how much would I need to invest right now? I in my major, the first main project that we did in our financial analytics class sophomore year was building a very, robust retirement calculator in Excel, which would, involve inflation. It would involve your income that you imagine that you're going to make when you get out of school. It involves any pay raises that you might think will happen. And since then, I've added on, taxes. So when you start pulling out into, for your retirement, how much will your capital gains tax be? And right now I'm living in the state of Virginia. I'm in Northern Virginia by DC, right? So I have that built in for Virginia taxes. So, you need to know. No one can answer these questions for you. No one can say you need exactly $2 million when you retire, because I'm not living in Holland or Germany or Arizona. I'm living in Virginia with the Virginia taxes and with my lifestyle and my values. So, and this is a very, very serious thing that I think everyone needs squared away. But, there's no one answer. And I think that frustrates people a lot. There's no one size solution.
I think just before you jump in, Marcus, one thing that I've just thought of it right now, is a little universal, is if you are able to find yourself a property that you can live in during your retirement, I think that's a really good goal, purely for the reason, because if you can't really control income, at least you can control your expense, right? In that way, right? You're able to live somewhere rent free, right? Obviously, you still have taxes to pay on the property yearly, and that always depends on every country and even states. But I think that is a decent idea, right? How big that house is meant to be, I think that's up to every person.
Yeah, if it's beachside or in the city,
3 pools.
And that's one of the things that I've noticed, and it has been a constant reminder, I think, also very much here in Germany. I don't know about the States, but the concern of individuals who are getting to become pensioners and realize that they're still living in an apartment that they pay rent on. And this rent keeps going up. The problem is that the increase of the rent over the next 10, 15, 20 years that they're still living there is disproportional to the increase in their pension fund. So they are spending more and more each year, percentage-wise, of their income, of their pension, on an apartment. And, I think of my Opa who, in his old age says, it was so wise of his wife to say, look, we need to pay off this mortgage, because there will come a point, they're very simple people. She used to clean toilets, and he used to, he actually did all right eventually, but he was a welder. That's how he started off with. He started work when he was 15. And, standard for that generation, I guess. But he says that he is so grateful that his wife had the long,
foresight.
The foresight things, to invest or to take their cash, and it wasn't a lot, but to take their cash and pay off their debts, so that when they did retire, they could live rent free in this house. Without having to worry about, the pension altogether. And my grandmother barely got any pension, though they had to live off my Opa's pension most of the time, and social benefits and so forth. But, this is a real concern for our generation who, I think, I don't remember the statistics, but who are very likely some of us never going to own any properties, because to accrue that much capital to be able to put down a down payment or to secure a loan is so difficult for a lot of people, because they're not earning enough, or they're just being unwise with their cash, and they're spending more, the 1.1 for every dollar. It's ludicrous. So that's that. The other thing I wanted to tell is a little story concerning, everybody deals with money differently, and it's to do with our dad. He told me this story a couple of years ago, or maybe months ago. I can't remember. He says that he bought in Germany. He was 6 years old, 7 years old. He just started school, and there was a stationery shop close by, and he found this pencil case that had all the coloring pencils, the felt tips. Everything was already filled, and he was really, really proud of it. He'd saved his money, bought this pencil case, and he went to school, and he said, "I'm not going to use the felt tip pens, because if I use them now, they'll be used up in the future. So I won't be able to use them in the future." So he never used them. Well, towards the end of his primary school, when 4 years later, he still had the same pencil case. He said he took meticulous care of it. He said, right, the day has finally come for me to use these felt tips. He opens them, and guess what? Dried out. He had missed the opportunity to actually use what he had paid for. And it was just this, it's great to defer pleasure sometimes from now into the future, and I think most of us know the story about the kids and the marshmallows, deferring current pleasure so that we can.
It's a fantastic study.
It's a great study. For any of you who don't know this story, go on YouTube, type in kids and marshmallows, it will come up. It is really, really, some of the videos are really cute with the kids, they're really funny. But he unfortunately he had waited so long that it was he'd lived his life without being able to use these felt tip pens, and obviously who cares is the felt tip pens, but he has lived his life according to that same mentality, which has allowed him to be very frugal, have enough capital to live healthily and into his pension. Great. But personally, it has come at the cost of relationships. It has come at the cost of his own mental health. Being able to just have that balance of, okay, I can, go on holiday. I can take my kids out. I can actually do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think having that balance is so vital. But yeah, all of the points so far. This is a great discussion. Fantastic.
Yeah. So let's talk then for the last bit of
Couple
the
minutes,
podcast about the group of people who obviously have spare income, who have like this $500 a month.
Right.
Maybe you just finished studying, started your first job, you're not married, or you are married, don't have children, or maybe you earn so much money that you support your children, or your children already moved out, now you have a lot of spare money. So what exactly do you do with those $500 a month? What comes into my bank account? What do I do?
So with those $500 a month,
give them to me.
So I would say with the first $500 a month until it becomes more like $700, $800, $1,000 a month. First $500 a month, I would type into your search browser, broker, and then your country name. So U.S. broker buy stock, something like that. Google search, and then you'll have a bunch of companies come up, a bunch of brokers, because what a lot of people don't understand is to be able to buy a stock, you actually can't buy a stock. I hate to break it to you, but you're not, you have to have a license, a brokerage license to buy a stock. And so you have to have an in-between person. And so you need to find a brokerage service in your country that will allow you to do that. Luckily, in the digital age, you actually don't have to call up a physical, like an actual person. It's all digitized. The licensing is digitized. You can get an app like Robinhood or TD Ameritrade, or you can go online to their websites and open a brokerage account in the United States. And you can trade in real time, without having what feels like a go-between, but you need a go-between. You need to find a broker. And after you find a broker, I would recommend typing in, again, Google search, Vanguard S&P 500. And it stands for Standard & Poor's, which is a company. I think it's a credit rating agency, and they also they do financial stuff. Standard & Poor's 500, S&P 500. Basically, they take around 500 of the biggest companies that they feel like represent the market as a whole. Most every industry really will be covered between timber, commodities, Amazon's in there, Microsoft's in there. So it'll follow the general market. So type in Google search Vanguard ETF S&P 500 S ampersand
We're gonna
P
link
500.
it down in the description.
Perfect.
Yeah, we'll put it down.
And Vanguard is one company that sells it. There are a lot of different people other than Vanguard. They just happen to have really low management fees, which if you don't want to deal with all of that yourself, just type in brokers with low management fees, like ETFs with low management fees, and you can go that, like, it's really not that hard to get involved. So you open a brokerage account, you find the ETF that you want. I would personally recommend the S&P 500, something that tracks it, and then you put the $500 there to start off. And it really is that simple. And a lot of these people, you can do it automatically. You can just check a few boxes, hook up your bank account, and that money is gone on payday. Boom, it's automatically deposited into there, and it can be a really good thing.
Cool.
Would you?
Yeah.
Sorry. Would you? What do you think about investing in, obviously not just because of the reason that I mentioned about pension, but investing in real estate?
So, in my studies, I built a lot of real estate models to predict, to handle different aspects of real estate between commercial, residential, whether it's buying a property, selling a property, appraising a property. I personally wouldn't recommend. Okay, let me just say, get educated and do whatever you feel comfortable with. I personally don't do real estate, and it's not bad, it's not wrong, it's just personal preference. My personal preference is based on a few things that I understand, and one is I am not comfortable with that kind of liability, especially in this point of my life, I'm a huge fan of liquidity. I'm a huge fan of timeframes on my time frame.
Right.
The second you take out a huge loan to pay for a property, whether it's having renters or whether you have businesses that are renting the commercial property from you, all of a sudden you have to make debt payments, typically monthly, and you have to have some kind of cash to pay for those debt payments. All of a sudden, if you lose money over 6 months, you're in a pickle, because you have to make those debt payments. If your stock portfolio goes down for 6 months, you don't lose money. People always say, "Oh man, I lost so much money in the stock market today." Like, you only lose money in the stock market if you decide to lose money in the stock market. You only lose if you sell, right? Period. You only make money if you sell. And like Lucas was saying earlier, finance is a very non-emotional field. If you cannot get emotional about finances, getting emotional about finances is seeing the news, seeing the stock market go up and down, and your emotions going up and down, and just realizing, I'm not going to cash out for 20 years or 6 months or 10 years or whatever your time frame is. And then if it goes up and down between now and then, you don't really care because you didn't cash out. You didn't lose $1.
Right.
But if you're in real estate, you might lose $1 if it goes down in the next 6 months because you have to make debt payments, and then you might have to evict people. You might have to pay management fees if you don't want to change toilets yourself. You don't want to clean the thing yourself. You might have to pay a management company to harass the people to pay the rent on time and pay the utilities, get that all
Send
set
some
up.
Russians over.
It gets really complicated. Real estate does have some advantages. In the United States, they're actually debating on whether to cut this kind of tax loophole. But if you're invested in a real estate property, I believe it's called a 1049 exchange, you can sell that property and you have a window of a few months, I believe, where if you invest that money, all of it, into an asset of equal or greater value, then you don't have to pay taxes on that sale. And so what you can do in theory is you can go and you can take your $20,000 and put a down payment onto a $100,000 home, and then you can sell that, and then you can take the $40,000 because you have some more equity, some more ownership in the home. You put that $40,000 on a $200,000 home, and you keep doing this and keep doing this and keep doing this. And so if you get educated enough about these loopholes, which I explained very simplified and oversimplified, and you can time things correctly and you are smart about it, and you have very good accountants who will help you with your taxes and very good lawyers who will help you close things out on time, be my guest. I think you can make a fortune. People do every day in real estate. I don't want to I don't want to invest my life and my time. We're talking about how everyone's different. Everyone has different goals, standards. Man, I want to read. I want to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I want to walk with my wife. I want to go to church I don't want to spend my entire life learning about all of these things when I can just buy into an ETF or pick a stock and just live life on my terms, and I find it much easier, much lower risk in my personal opinion.
So at what point would you buy a personal property for yourself? You personally for yourself. Like, let's say you started investing, your investment gone up, you have like $100,000 now. Obviously, you don't really want to touch that because you lose all this compound investment, right?
Correct. Yep.
So when is the point where you personally say, that's the point I buy a house for my retirement?
So for me personally, buying a house.
Or would you even, would you just live on rent for the rest of your existence?
Honestly, that's to be determined. That is to be determined. I do not view your personal house as the greatest asset. In fact, I would say if your house is the biggest asset on your individual balance sheet, and I would recommend everyone keeping an individual balance sheet where you have the amount of assets that you own, the amount of liabilities that you need to pay, things, and then your net income, right? Your net worth, I guess. if your personal home is the biggest asset, then you are failing. I think, depending on your age. If you're like 40, 50, then yes, I would say that is true. I would only buy a home if I knew that was the home I wanted. That was where I wanted to have it. I was very satisfied, and I really might, but I'm not there yet. I'm still young. I'm gonna move around. Life is crazy, and I want to be nimble enough so that if I get a better paying job in San Francisco, I don't have to hope that the housing market is on my side, right? And interest rates and everything. So that's a John in 50 years kind of question.
Yeah, because because there's a lot of debate about owning a home or living off of rent, because like you said, all the reliability and stuff. So that's why I asked you personally, not a general suggestion, right? Because it's up to everyone's opinion, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's no wrong or right answer. I personally think a lot of people are very, very compelled to real estate because we're around it so much. It's very easy to comprehend at a high level. Like, oh, I pay rent. Somebody is making money off of my rent. I want to do that, But stocks is so arbitrary, and so it's kind of out there, I think, for a lot of people, that it's much less easy to imagine making money and having it compound versus like, oh, I get this property and then I make I get 2 properties and 3 properties, and it's physical. I feel like in the mind's eye, it's easier. Yeah, it's easier to visualize, whereas stocks it's a piece of paper in the old days at best, which is arbitrary enough, and now it's just a digital idea. So yeah.
Well, I mean, we're not going to go into it because I think it'll take forever to explain. I mean, even the fact that we've got money, trying to what is money?
What is money? Yeah.
It's just
it's
a rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, it is.
But hey, so I mean, what I would say is that we call it a day here, and it's been a fantastic. I think this has probably been one of my favorite discussions on the podcast. Just because these are real life things. John, we spoke about this lack of knowledge, this general life knowledge that is so pervasive in society nowadays. Kids are being taught Pythagoras theorem. Great, fantastic. I've since never used Pythagoras theorem. I still think it's a great thing to teach because it teaches logical thinking. But how about we also try and teach or learn real things that are going to affect us? We all will have to pay taxes. How do I do my tax returns?
Mm-hmm.
We talked to another topic is also health. Mental, physical health. What do I eat? How do I eat? How do I exercise? What should I do? And we're not talking about you should do 10 push-ups a day. It's all that's up to you. But like Lucas said, be educated, and that's the whole point of the podcast. We are none the wiser. I mean, we have Jonas is a specialist on Bitcoin, so he is very much the wiser in that. You and Lucas, you guys have the finances and the economics background. To be honest, I've got nothing. I feel like I've just got general knowledge about stuff trivia. And I guess somebody said, "Oh, you're a good public speaker," and I'm like, "Yep, I'll take that. That's fine." But this week, I don't know. We are not none the wiser. But we are #none the wiser, and follow us on Instagram, subscribe. And if you have any questions, post them in the comments below. We'll send the links as well. And if you want to know about, how to invest, how to set up, those kind of things, there's tons of videos online. If you still are struggling, sure thing, contact us. Maybe we'll do, a short video on a tutorial maybe, on how to do things. But yeah. Thanks again, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, peace out. This was #nonethewiser.